Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the How to Get an Analytics Job podcast, where today we are joined by really, I think it's going to be a great guest. So, Ashutosh, welcome.
Thanks, Hunter, for having me.
So, Ashutosh, I just want to get a feeling of your background. How did you get started in the analytics industry?
Yeah, I went to school to study industrial engineering. I always loved working with computers and I wanted to do something with robotics, artificial intelligence. So, when I was pursuing my graduate school in industrial engineering, I took courses that had focus on machine learning, programming, database management, and so on and so forth. And I that was my master's thesis, building confidence intervals on neural networks, and my PhD dissertation was also using machine learning in higher education problems. So I was training for it, but I was not planning on getting into higher education, which is what I did eventually.
Well, why? What made you decide to change from being mostly focused on technical stuff to going into higher education?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to obviously keep my technical streak going and my experience in machine learning and AI going and wanted to build solutions for that. It just happened that opportunities in higher education opened up when I was a graduate assistant. I worked in an institutional research office, which helps the an higher education institution with lots of different data sets, with whether it's student retention, graduation, financial aid packaging, admissions, yield, and all of that. So lots of data, but in higher education. So that was my graduate assistantship in, and it just seemed like a good kind of career path to keep building that expertise, but apply the AI and machine learning to higher ed problems.
So you wanted to be a little bit more well-rounded, and you felt like that higher education was a really great way to do that.
Yeah, it seemed like a good, what you can say, a playground of problems. Machine learning is still nascent, it's not been applied widely. And especially the problem that I was working on, which was my dissertation in student retention, it is still a big problem because on an average, only about 50% of students graduate in 6 years. And about 30 to 40% of students drop out within the first year. And this is, we are talking about not even 2 year schools or community college. Their retention rates and graduation rates are even worse than this. So I thought, can we use machine learning to build some models and try to identify, are there any patterns that tell us why students are dropping, or if there is anything that can be done to create some sort of intervention programs to help increase that graduation rate and retention rate.
Yeah, we've noticed that in the industry, there's a lot of people who are seeking alternative forms of education when it comes, especially to data analytics. I think a lot of that comes from maybe a career oriented aspect. Um, in your experience, do you think that higher education is meeting the that career oriented side of things when it comes to the analytics atmosphere?
Yeah, I cannot speak to that specific question because my experience is not in building analytics programs for academic degrees or certificates. But I think it's with any education program, you first of all get what you put into it. And second, if there's no practical component to it, then you are really at loss because even simple things as building linear regression models in your stats 101 classes that you see, you get a nicely curated data set with maybe 50 or 100 rows, and you have to build your models and compute all your coefficients and everything. It just seems very linear in the process that how you follow, but that's not what real world is like. Real world is messy and you spend so much time just collecting the data and making sure that you have the right data and it's free of biases and errors. And what do you do with missing data? Whereas again, stats 101 might say, oh, just exclude those because you don't need those. But that has such predictive power if you exclude the missing rows. So you have to think about all those things, and that comes with real life experience.
Do you personally solve a lot of those problems with machine learning? Is that something that machine learning has kind of adapted to, is the data cleaning process?
I wouldn't say machine learning itself to help you. I mean, obviously, there are the best case scenarios for this is when you have imbalance in your classes, right? So that's when you can use machine learning to generate synthetic data sets or even resample just using your traditional statistical methods as well. But in terms of knowing your data and which data fields to pull from and actually how to get that data out, especially in the modern, uh, all the data sources that you have to jump through so many different hoops to get that, and plus you have to know all these different technologies that help you get that data. I mean, in my world that's not the case because most of the times our data is structured, so
Mhm.
at least you are working with databases and you have few tables to work from. But I'm sure it's very different in a company structure where you have thousands of tables and various different databases and technologies to use.
Right, right. And so you seem very statistically oriented. I know there's a lot of people who are trying to enter the industry who maybe don't have a mathematical background. They come from other backgrounds. Do you have any suggestions for those people who are really trying? They want to get into the math, the more technical side of things, but they're just struggling to get into it. Was there any tools or things that you did that helped you learn?
Yeah, and that's such a broad question because there are so many entry points for somebody. And I mean, right now the technology industry is kind of we are seeing lots of layoffs and people are struggling. So whatever I say may not be actually applicable because people are already there are lots of people with experience who might be trying to find new jobs now. But what I would say, and this is I would say common knowledge and maybe not so common, which is trying to find applications again with whatever you know and trying to build those use cases, applications, and creating a nice portfolio and talking about this. So, in my latest book that I talk about career success, one of the things that I talk about, and the book's name is SOAR, and the target audience is actually people who are fresh out of college or school program and have maybe 1 or 2 years of experience and who want to come up with a framework and figure out how to do this. So, two things
Hmm.
that I talk about in that book, and I'm sure other people will tell you kind of similar things. One is create, you have to create things outside of your normal 9 to 5 job or outside of your normal expectations, hearing about what problems people face. People complain about, oh, this is not working, that's not working, but nobody does anything about it. So can you do something about it and creating that? So that's one very practical application of creation. If you hear about a problem, try to come up with a solution, or something you're passionate about, try to create something, whether it's a blog post, YouTube tutorial, podcast like what you're doing right now, or white papers. Collect problems that people are saying. Like maybe people are saying, I don't understand cloud technologies. Then maybe you talk to 10 different experts and you come up with your own roundtable white paper kind of case study. So we created that. But the second part is also critical, which is elevate. How you have to elevate, you have to talk about it. Otherwise, nobody would know about it.
Y-
So
y-
creating and elevating that, those are kind of two things can help you differentiate yourself from others.
I kind of think about it like weightlifting. When you're lifting weights, you're trying to get stronger. You need to gradually add more and more weight. It's kind of similar, I would imagine, in from an education's perspective, where you have to kind of gradually add more and more things to learn. I mean, we're in an industry um, where tools or software are constantly evolving, and sometimes people struggle to keep up with that. And so you're right, absolutely. I think a great way to do that is by creating. Um, eh,
And
do,
trust me, I struggle. I mean, again, since I have not been involved with all these modern infrastructure because our problem sets are different. I just recently I took a class with AWS MLOps, and just seeing the breadth of solutions that they have is just crazy. So I don't know who if there is one person who can know all of those things. It's just it's not possible. So you have to, as you said, just keep building one muscle at a time, or maybe keep shuffling them as your days progress, but keep adding those to your repertoire.
Yeah. So as you evolved in this path of working with college institutions, how did your personal brand come into play a lot there? Did you have to kind of say at a certain point, I definitely want this is what I want to do. I want to be involved with college institutions. I need to uh, get my presence to reflect that. Um, I'd imagine that's something that you did have to do.
Yeah, so the elevate piece that I spoke about, that's what it is. If you want to be known, if you want to be noticed, You have to first create something that people would find value of, and then you need to talk about those things.
How do you find that thing? Because sometimes a big topic is proprietary data and stuff
Mm.
maybe not being open source.
Right.
It's really difficult to find dirty data to really get your hands on. Um, is how do you approach that problem? If from try to get into like a novice's perspective here.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And this is a good example, actually. Since I work in nonprofits and higher education, nonprofits are always looking for people to help them with lots of different problems. Sometimes it's just very basic. How do I record all these gifts that I'm getting, or how do I properly store all the data of my donors? So maybe that's when someone can come and suggest and say, hey, maybe you can use Salesforce or some other solution to like a modern CRM to host and store your data. Then once that's done, if they already have that, then the next step would be is let me help you aggregate this data so that you can see some meaningful patterns out of it. And then you can take one step further and say, let me help you build some models so that you can find your next donors, or maybe your big donors, or maybe how much money you should ask for them. And same thing with digital engagement or direct response. You can help them create those segments. So nonprofits, I think, is a really good way to get your some sort of experience, and they're always looking for help in people.
How much does your network play into having those opportunities available to you?
Oh,
They're
huge.
huge. Um, so how much networking? I mean, how much networking have you done over the years? Because I'm a college student. I actually just reached 500 connections on LinkedIn, and it was an effort. You have to continuously make your online presence known and make the work that you're doing available to everybody. Um, we hear about Tableau work, for example. You can post that on Tableau Public. Um, how do you get your name out there? When it
Yeah. So this feels like a plant of a question, because that's one chapter I dedicate in the book, which is just opportunities, because opportunities play such a big role in one's success. Sometimes people call it luck, or sometimes people are lucky; they are just in the right place at the right time. But for a lot of people, if they don't have that opportunity, things might just go completely in a different direction for them. For example, one of the studies that I quote in the book is they looked at one technology company, and they looked at who got a job offer. So they looked at how many applications came in. How did those applications come in? Did they come in because someone referred that candidate, or they just applied online? So you'd be surprised to hear how many people got through job referrals just to get an interview, not even a job offer. Like less than 2% of people who ultimately got a job offer came through the job portal. So obviously this is a case study of only one company, but still more than, I believe, 30,000 applications that they looked at. And same thing goes the next level. Your chances of getting a job are really high if you actually your first interview is with the hiring manager rather than with the recruitment person or the recruiter. So how do you get in front of the hiring manager? Obviously, you have to get through your network. So if you look at in that study, you will see for Black and Hispanic folks, the referral rates are really low because they don't have that network, they don't have the community inside to refer them to those jobs. So again, how do you get into that network then? If you don't have a network, to your question, how do you build that? So again, I would say the same thing is volunteer at conferences, create your own things which brings people together, talk to people, have lots of informational interviews. That's a great way to connect with lots of people. One of the great books I like, and I quote about it in my book, is called Unapologetically Ambitious. It's by Shelley Archambault, and she talks about how she became CEO of a tech company. Very few Black females who have been a CEO of a tech company, and she got there because when she started as an intern at IBM, someone told her, "Why wonder how you can get somewhere when you can just ask someone, how did you get there?" So
Mhm.
that's such a great framing of your mindset, that hey, I don't have to actually wonder whether I would ever be able to get that. Just ask someone who has already been there. So she just picked up the directory and the phone and started calling everybody who she thought was of interest, and ask them, how did you get there? And people love to talk about themselves, people love to give advice. And if sometimes on LinkedIn it's a hit or miss because people get lots of these emails, but if you are very targeted and you have really good questions, you might be able to get 15 or 20 minutes of someone's time and ask really good questions, not about, oh, what's the compensation level. Those are not the questions you want to ask.
Well, so how do you ask really good questions? How do you come up with the right questions to ask? Is that just from feeling out the person? Is that just from, just coming naturally from your heart? I mean, how do you ask the right questions?
Yeah, authenticity is definitely good. Having that curiosity and really good empathy for the person that is in front of you and that you really care about their advice is obviously a great way to go. But asking good questions is, you have to do your homework. You have to. So the way I think about it is that you don't want to ask questions that are going to be relevant in your role within the next 6 months. You want to ask questions that might be relevant 5 years from now for your role, the role that you might be in. So you want to portray yourself as someone who thinks about bigger questions and bigger problems. And you're thinking about the company, you're thinking about the strategy. So usually asking questions about those, uh, like how does this product evolve, or where do you see this product going in 5 years, or I have seen in my research that these things are not really working well in the industry, and yet you are putting this out there. What is the strategy you think there is? So again, putting yourself as almost like a management consultant and thinking about these things is a great way to set yourself apart. I mean, I will give you one example. I reached out to a person 10, 12 years ago, just like this. I said, hey, I know you're at this company. I would love to ask you some questions. And it just happened that I was in Chicago and this person was flying out of Chicago. So I was able to meet him at the airport and I asked him some of similar questions. And we kept in touch for a year, although I was not looking for a job at that time. Every other month or so, he would keep reminding me that, hey, we have an opening that you might be interested in. So just that small interaction of 30 minutes made a good impression on him. So asking really good questions, being authentic and really interested sets you apart.
So not being transactional, essentially.
Mhm.
Sometimes I don't know if this has ever happened to you on LinkedIn, but sometimes people will reach out to me and say, "Hey, can you help me get an analytics job?" Which, yes, okay, yeah, we're on. That's the title of the podcast. You're here hoping to get an analytics job, but that's not the right way to approach that. That just comes off as almost crass a little bit.
Yeah. And it's hard to be helpful also because, again, with what you said, like a novice or maybe a college student, we, at that point of time, you kind of think, okay, what do I have to offer? I really don't have a whole lot to offer at that time. But sometimes, again, just giving people validation about even what they're thinking, or you are probing them so that they think, it's also a good thing because it's not necessarily you are giving them something, but they feel good about, oh, you asked me some good questions that you made me think. That's also, I think, some sort of a form of giving.
So as I'm listening to you talk here, you do a really good job of articulating business perspective from things, even though you have a really technical background. Sometimes people who are really technical do struggle with the communication aspect. Is that something that you had to develop over the years, or is it like that you had to consistently work towards?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I remember a very critical point in my career where I had finished my PhD and I was thinking, okay, what should I do next? And I still felt like that I did not have full computer algorithms, how they work, or how they, like the computer science degree itself. It's more technical, more theoretical than actually your applied machine learning or applied any programming. So I thought maybe I should learn that as another take on another master's degree when I was at University of Michigan. But then something actually pretty drastic happened. I saw someone speak to a large crowd, and they were able to motivate a lot of people just through their speaking. And that was a big aha moment for me. And I also read this book called Confessions of a Public Speaker from a former project manager named Scott Birkin at Microsoft. And he also became a public speaker, and he saw the value of speaking. And I can definitely say in my career, that's one of the best things that I've done as an investment into learning how to speak, because that I've been able to obviously communicate these ideas, and that's what matters. It doesn't matter really whether your model is performing 99% accuracy. It actually matters how are you going to use that to improve overall business outcomes. And explaining that vision, sharing that vision with lots of people, getting them excited, uh, sets you apart so far from. And then you become, your name is in the conversations around water coolers. Then again, you're getting your brand out there, because then you can say, oh, Hunter is the person who talked about this idea. And you have to invest your time into improving that and thinking about your ideas with clarity and with making it very concise, so that you are not boring people with lots of different things, and bringing in the technical flavors when they are needed. But mostly it is explaining your vision and sharing your ideas with, like, going back to your opportunities also. When you go and speak at conferences, that was another thing that helped me in my career, is going and speaking at various conferences, bringing this kind of humor, clarity, vision, idea sharing. That built my network really fast.
So I can't help but notice, there's been a couple of books that you've referenced so far, and we're only 20 minutes into the podcast, and you're also a self-published author 3 times. So there must be a book or two that really, shaped your analytics, the start of your analytics journey. Um, what are those books, just out of curiosity, if there is one?
Yeah, that's, I mean, again, I studied for these things, so there were lots of textbooks that helped. But to see the practical aspects were Tom Davenport's books on competing on analytics, and his Harvard Business Review articles. Those were very influential when I got started, 2005 or that time period, because they built all the business cases. I mean, he and his co-authors built the business case for why analytics is important and why you should be using that. And then also there were some, I want to say their name is Barry and Linoff. They wrote these books on data mining in early 2000, where they talked about how direct marketing companies and others can use that. That was a great book.
Great, great. So, sitting off in the sidelines right now, we have Diane, who is one of our students in our new apprenticeship cohort for Silvertone Analytics. I'm sure I've noticed her, she's been writing anxiously in the corner, so I'm sure she has a couple questions for you lined up. So, welcome to the stream, Diane.
Hi, thanks for having me. So everything you said totally resonates with me. I think Hunter brought up a really good point about, besides just having the technical skills, you had to build your communication skills and public speaking. And I noticed that you've led a lot of people and you really focus on relationship building. So can you talk a little bit more about like how you noticed the teams maybe functioned a lot better based on some strategies that maybe you used to lead more proficiently?
Yeah, and let me just make sure that I understand your question correctly. So you're talking about external audiences, or just in general working
In
internally?
your own team
Okay.
internally.
Yeah, I mean, again, I will say the same thing, that explaining your vision and your ideas that bring excitement, and people, you bring people along with that. So it's not should be completely so radical that people cannot even associate themselves. So they need to see themselves in that ideal future, better scenario. And you show that this is how it's going to be, whether it's visuals, whether it's your stories, or just imagination, explaining that imagination. When people feel that, okay, they could be there in that space, that's when people start really buying into that and say, yeah, I want to be working in that space, or I want to do those things.
Yeah, I saw you also, you had the article about how to retain employees. And I thought, wow, this is powerful because at the very end, it says, well, if they leave because it's a better growth role, we can't hold them back. We train them so that they can be better. So, how do you think? I mean, some people haven't read the article, so maybe you could give a recap, but how do you think you really develop people for that next level?
Yeah, and this is a work in progress. So all, I think all leaders keep learning. So this is definitely a work in progress for me. So there are 2 or 3 scenarios. One is that you are just very fortunate to have a great team that is, people are just motivated to learn and they want to improve themselves. Then that's really easy for you as a manager, because you're just helping them, finding out, okay, what are the areas that you want to grow into, where can I help you grow into those areas? What are those opportunities, internal, external, learning, certification, whatever that may be? So it becomes easier. But when people say, well, I'm okay with where I am, which is fine. Obviously, you need people to in all phases, because otherwise, how will your machine run if you don't have people who are continuously and you adding the stability to it? So then that becomes not a challenge, but then you think about, okay, how do I, should I, you ask those questions. Okay, what is my role here? Do I just become a manager where we just check in with the day-to-day work and just be happy with that? Which is, again, sure. But then the third scenario is where you have difficulties, where people, you have management problems, where you don't know how to resolve this. And then that's definitely still work in progress for me, is to figure that out. How do you do this properly? And again, helping them. My always operating principle is I give the benefit of doubt and I think about the best, that people have best interest in their mind and they're doing these things because there must be something else that's going on. Nobody's intentionally coming to work to say, no, I don't want to do my best work. So figuring that out and helping them do their best work, and not only whether it's best work right now, but as you said, maybe best work 2 years from now, so that they can set up for that next job.
Sometimes I think when you're talking about doing your best work, sometimes I think motivation for people is a really big struggle. I don't know if you've ever had any struggles with motivation. I'm sure you have at some point in time. I mean, come on, everybody does. But
Mhm.
how do you go about overcoming that problem of just getting started, with the work?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have been. There are again various studies on this topic that to show you that if you are motivated intrinsically, then you are likely to perform your best all the time, because you are not looking for external validation. You're not looking for bonuses. You're not looking for new titles. You are just saying, no, I just want to do my best every day. And you're just saying, my competition is with myself, my bar is myself, I'm going to keep improving that. So this is a different mindset. Obviously you have that continuous improvement mindset. But when people are motivated extrinsically, you have to figure that out also. What is that going to get them motivated to that do their best? For me personally, as I said, is just, am I making an impact? If I'm not, then I have to find something else that's challenging and will make an impact. But it's harder. I mean, people management is the hardest job. Technology, I think, is slightly easier because, yeah, the zeros and ones will behave as you want them to, sometimes at least. But people management is the toughest.
How do you
When
manage? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No,
I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna say, like, when did you make that transition from like the technical to the people management, or like, how did you? I mean, obviously, you probably like learned on the job, and every day is different. But like, what advice would you give to someone who might be moving into management?
Yeah, you have to learn your management style. That's for sure. I had really one great peer who was able to customize his style depending on people, and that was again big learning moment for me, because I thought, okay, this is a standard process that everybody, I can apply that to everybody. And obviously did not work, because everybody is different and everybody operates differently and they have different motivations and incentives that they operate on. But I learned from this person who was able to customize when it came to managing people. For every different person, they or he did a different used a different strategy. How would you go about that? I mean, you said it, it's a lot of it is learning on the job. You don't get to learn this from the books. Yeah, you might read about it, you might read hundreds of strategies, tactics. Obviously it never hurts to read good books, but then you learn when you actually have somebody to manage. Because then like, if you look at your kind of, if you were to plot your career trajectory, you'll see, oh, you start with Excel, then you get in databases, then you do programming, then you do maybe cloud databases, and then you start doing PowerPoints, and you start doing Word documents. So it kind of drops off, and that's when you become into more into management, because you're just dealing with all that stuff. um, I don't have a good answer how you make that switch. You just have to prove yourself that you can again explain that vision. You have some good ideas, and then you are leading with empathy, and you are leading with the best interest of your organization in mind. So you're loyal to that mission, and not necessarily the company, because companies could change, but whatever the mission you are working on right now, you're loyal to that, then it's easier to make a case that, yeah, I'm ready to take a management role. And you need to want it, because it's just because you're doing a great job as an individual contributor doesn't mean you're a good manager. So you need to want that, and then you really learn as you go.
You seem to have a really entrepreneurial mindset. And so when I ask this question, this is a question that I would ask people who are entrepreneurs, um, do you feel like you've had like a biggest failure, and if you have, well, what did you take away from it? Because every failure that in my experience that I've had has just been, a learning experience, as
Yeah,
cliche as it sounds.
right. Now I had two, one of the big failures. Yes, you learn through failures, and failures are going to happen. You cannot avoid them as much as you try to, and you should try to, but you are not going to avoid them. So two big failures I had. One was, again, this kind of management style, where I was trying to manage someone thinking that this would work. For example, I'll just give you one example. Again, I believe in people. I believe that they have the best interests when they're coming to work and working with other folks. And I was trying to give um, create some flexibility in how that would happen, how you would do your work. Or I said it doesn't matter what time you come or when you leave or how you do this, as long as the work gets done. So I was just trying to, again, but this was a fresh graduate of college, and they needed more structure. So I missed out on that cue completely, that, oh, shoot, I should have actually given them more structure and helped them. No, you need to do these things. And that person took my words very literally and wouldn't just show up until 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and left the organization without telling us and just took a job. And it was just weird. Fortunately, it lasted only 2 or 3 months, but it gave me a really nice lesson that, no, you need to tweak your style. You need to think about the person that you're working with. And thankfully, again, that was early in my career, so I was able to learn from that. Another project, which was not a big failure in terms of money or other things, but definitely feels like a wasted effort, which is a big lesson for all of us in analytics and data science, which is the adoption. If you're It doesn't matter how effective your models are, if there is no overall adoption, your overall efficacy is pretty close to zero. So we built this really nice interface. I designed this, I wireframed a concept to help some of our internal customers through a mobile app, so that we could bubble up some of these recommendations using machine learning and all of that. And initially, we got good excitement. That's what people wanted. But then we saw very little usage of all of that. So that was, again, a big lesson in, okay, you don't want to spend too much time into perfecting your machine learning models or even building these application front ends or interfaces if there's no adoption. So if I were to do it differently, that's how I would look at it. Okay, can I really see good adoption of this first and really build traction before you build that fully? And again, I mean, trust me, I did try the MVP model and the lean manufacturing and everything, lean product development, but maybe involving more potential customers would have helped
Do you
rather than
think
having only a couple of them. Yeah.
do you think at this point you develop the oral solutions and or the oral problems and solutions first before you start rushing into, getting into the data of things?
Right. And again, that this is also a work in progress for me, because the world of the user experience design and writing those stories, just like how you're saying, the narratives, the oral part definitely helps. And I think there is a craft there to be explored, to create those stories first before you actually build anything.
Right, right.
So I have a question that I think a lot of people would want to kind of figure out. If someone wanted to get into analytics, what is your advice to them? So I know, like, I've been so caught up in trying to learn all the tools. Which one do I learn first? Excel, SQL, Tableau, Power BI. So it gets like overwhelming. So what's your advice for someone who wants to get into the field?
Yeah, it definitely gets overwhelming, and there are so many things that one could do to to at least seem like a really competitive candidate, but there is some sort of a diminishing return, at least until again you get your first job, because you don't know what technologies are going to be used or in what shape or form it's going to be used. So trying to get that first experience is so critical, and I guess that's what the whole thing about this podcast is like, how do you get into that? So a couple of examples that we discussed previously was nonprofits is a great example. Nonprofits are always looking for people, and again, I mean, that's a good thing because it also aligns with your passion areas, because there is a nonprofit for everything that one might care about. So thinking about reaching out to them, this also helps you build your network. You're creating opportunities. Maybe even like a simple example, I'm just making this up, but maybe you are talking to three or four different executive directors in your area of nonprofits, and you maybe invite them for lunch or something, three of them. Maybe you can get a pizza or something and say, hey, what are some of the common issues that we are seeing here? What are some of the common threads that we are seeing here? Then you can write a white paper on those topics, or you can propose some potential solutions on that topic. Maybe you can bring in some other folks who can help you build some of those solutions. And sometimes it's not, you're not talking about AWS services, right? You're just really talking about Excel files. So it's not as difficult to sometimes get an entry point as well. So that's would be my always first recommendation, because getting a job is tough, but at least through nonprofits you can gain real experience. And creating those having those informational interviews with your target companies is again useful, asking them really good questions, and they will keep you in mind if there's something that opens up later on.
So not as much of a focus on like the technical skills.
Yeah, I don't want to discount that. Obviously, when you're ready to apply to these big companies and jobs, I mean, they ask for everything. The
Yeah.
technology might be invented this year. They will say you would need 10 years of experience in that technology. So you cannot avoid that. We definitely want to be seen like a competitive candidate, but 9 out of 10 times, at least as a hiring manager, if someone tells me that they are very interested in data science and they love data science, and when I ask them, okay, what did you do about that? Did you stay up at night and build some models? I'm not going to ask them, but that's what I'm looking for as an answer. Did you stay up as a whole night and build a fantasy football model? Wrote a program in Python. Now show me, like,
It's
if you
interesting.
really.
It's interesting that you bring that up. I'm actually building a model for my fantasy team as we speak. So,
There you go.
Of
So
course
that
you
shows
are.
interest, right? That's so you're
Yeah.
actually doing something that you care about. You're not just doing your school projects, because everybody does the school project. So there's nothing different about you. But if that's what I look for on the resumes. That if you say you like this, I need to see some examples. And what better way of showing that than again working with nonprofits and aligning your passion areas with that.
local government places as well. I know there was a little while back, or actually, I guess it was almost 2 years ago at this point. I worked with Greensboro Fire Data. It was just I reached out to my local government. They said, "Hey, we have all this data. It's actually on their website. We have all this data. We need somebody to go through this. Please go through this." And there's plenty of places that are like that. So I think there is no shortage really of new data to find. It's just a matter of putting yourself out there and finding it.
Yeah. And real life problems
Mhm.
that people want to solve. So what better applications could there be than this?
Right, right. While we are on the topic though of learning new tools, I think oftentimes, like you were saying, some of these companies put out their advertisements for everything. They want every tool. They want R, Python, SQL, Tableau, Power BI, Excel. They want it all. Um, do you th- and your experience, I don't do you think all of those are entirely necessary when you're applying, or is having a really good grasp of maybe just even one or two of those tools, and then saying to the guy, the hiring manager, hey, listen, I'd be willing to I'd be willing to pick up any of these other tools. I'm just really passionate about it. I personally can't see any hiring manager saying no to that.
Yeah. So there are two hurdles, right? First, again, this automated tracking system, application tracking system. How do you get past that? That goes back to the discussion that we had about opportunities. is you have to build your network. So you cannot go through that process to get a job. It's very unlikely that you'll get a call, unless again it's campus recruitment or something, or they're just trying to find 5,000 software engineers. Then that's different, because then you might get through. But if you're looking for some specific jobs, you have to build that network. You have to have somebody who will refer you in, or you have to get in front of the hiring manager somehow. So then you avoid that. So now you're not competing for, oh, does this resume have all these keywords? Does it have R? Does it have Python?
Mhm.
Does it have Tableau? No. Then, as a hiring manager, somebody actually read your resume, and then they saw, oh, you work with the fire department, local fire department, to improve whatever. I don't know, maybe improve your routes, or improve the efficacy of their overall operation, right?
Response time. It happened to be response time.
Wow, look at that. I mean, that's just a fantastic example, that if you were to say, yeah, I improved the response time by 30%, or whatever that may be. And now they will ask you questions, and they say, okay, what tools do you use? And then they will be curious. At least I, as a hiring manager, just like what you said, Hunter, I'm curious about your thought process. How are you really curious? What did you do? How did you explore the data set? How did you explore the problem? But getting to that stage is very difficult. And how do you do that? You have to create opportunities for yourself.
So it's explaining your once you get that opportunity available to yourself, it's explaining how you worked through it in story form.
Yeah.
Storytelling with data is what we always talk about, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And that you're not shy of picking any tool that would help you solve that problem. So if you
Right.
had to learn Python or some sort of module, you did that. But because it was needed, not because my coursework asked me to do that.
Right.
Right. So Diane, do you have any other questions for Ashutosh or?
Yeah. So, can you tell us a little bit about the current company you work for? It's a nonprofit I saw, but
Yeah,
can you
it's
tell us
not
a
a
little bit more about
non-profit.
it?
We are a for-profit company. The name is CCS Fundraising. Our clients are though all nonprofits. So we
Oh,
help
okay.
nonprofits fundraise effectively. CCS Fundraising is one of the oldest and one of the largest consulting companies in this space.
And you work as a senior, or as the senior vice president of data science and analytics.
Right. So I lead the data science practice area for CCS Fundraising.
When your team comes to you with either professional or project specific problems, what are some of the most commonly occurring problems that they're coming to you with?
Yeah, I'm sure you guessed it already. It's usually, oh, the data is not with us still. We've been working with this client for 2 to 3 weeks, and or the data is incorrect. What do we do now? Or just working through that whole process. And again, as I said, some nonprofits are mature and they have lots of resources, so they can figure this out pretty easily. And they even have technical resources, but some nonprofits are just not there. So sometimes you have to work with them to get that data that you need for your analysis. And that's why I'm saying that nonprofits are looking for people, and definitely a great option. I mean, I love your example of the fire department. I cannot see. I mean, that's the, if you have read any Cal Newport's books, like So Good, Be So Good That They Cannot Ignore You, or other books, that's what he talks about, is examples that seem unfathomable for anybody. It's like, how did a college or high schooler build this model for the local fire department to improve the response rate? I cannot get that out of my head. Now, because you occupied that space, your likelihood of getting a job is pretty high if I have an opening. But if you just said, oh, I ran a Python module to run the Titanic data set or Iris data, then everybody's doing that.
It's kind of like it almost kind of becomes like jargon at that point, just technical
Hmm.
jargon, just throwing out like, oh, I worked with this tool, that tool, and not really having any kind of meaning behind it. It's
Yeah.
really, it all does come down to just having something, creating something, like we said at the beginning,
Yeah.
just creating something.
Yeah. Your curiosity and your continuous improvement mindset. Because again, these tools will keep coming every other week or something. How are you going to keep up if you don't have the continuous improvement mindset?
Yeah, yeah. So we're approaching the 45-minute mark, and that seems like you just wrapped that up in probably the most perfect bow that you possibly could. Diane, do you have any last questions for Ashutosh before we get ready to wrap up here?
No, that's it. Thank you for all your insight, and I think it's going to motivate a lot of people.
And so, Ashutosh, is the best way for people to reach out to you on LinkedIn, and also where can they find your books at?
Yes, so the books are on Amazon. There are various ways. Yes, LinkedIn would be a great start, and if you're gonna post some links somewhere, I will happy to share those links with you. But my website is also a good way to find some of these resources. My one of the data science with R book is open source. It's on my website. The latest book, The Career, is on Amazon as well as is on my website. But yeah, if you have any questions, I'm happy to help. I know I'm a product of lots of opportunities given to me. I would not be here without those. So happy to extend those to anybody who needs a hand.
So nice, so nice. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ashutosh. And I'm sure everybody loved. I hope everyone loved this episode. So I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up. But thank you everybody for listening and joining us. And thanks for coming on. Also, Diane, it was nice to have you on as well.
Of course. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.